Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, all those articles, research papers, maybe even our own scribbled notes, and we
Yeah.
really boil them down for you.
Right. We pull out the most important bits, the key insights.
Exactly. Think of it like your shortcut to being, well, really well informed. We try to pack it with surprising facts and hopefully keep it engaging, maybe even a little fun.
We hope so. And this deep dive, it's really custom built for you, the listener, who's curious and wants to get under the surface of what's happening globally.
Definitely. So today, wow, we've got quite a range. We're starting with something almost like sci-fi, our own brains and how they can sort of travel through time.
Mental time travel. It's a core cognitive function. And then we'll shift gears completely to some very out there conservation ideas. Think radioactive rhinos.
Radioactive rhinos. I'm still trying to get my head around that one,
Yep.
seriously. But then from there, we dive into the global economy trade wars, tariffs.
Yeah, the ripple effects, which are huge. We'll look at how that's playing out, the diplomatic shifts, whether sanctions are actually, working.
And we'll touch on some critical public health stuff, too, and climate change impacts that are happening right now. It's all straight from the headlines, really painting a picture of, well, just how interconnected and fast-moving everything is. Okay, let's kick off with this first big idea. Mental time travel. Sounds like a movie title, doesn't it? But apparently it's something our brains just do.
It's a genuinely fascinating part of human cognition, yeah. And arguably, it's one of the things that makes us quite unique. When psychologists and neuroscientists talk about mental time travel, they mean our ability to do two related things.
Okay, what are they?
One is mentally journeying back into our memories, not just recalling facts, but really re-experiencing specific personal events from our past. That's called episodic memory.
Right, like remembering your 10th birthday party, not just knowing the date it happened.
Exactly, that feeling of being there again. The second part is projecting ourselves into the future, imagining potential scenarios, simulating what might happen.
So planning your next vacation or worrying about a presentation next week.
Precisely. It's not just passive recall. It's an active, constructive process. Studies, like those you find on PubMed Central, show this is fundamental to our cognitive architecture. It links our past experiences with how we anticipate and plan for the future.
It sounds incredibly complex. I mean, my cat definitely remembers feeding time, maybe even anticipates it. But is this kind of detailed re-experiencing and future planning something uniquely human?
Well, that's a really good question, and there's still some debate. But prominent researchers, like Thomas Suddendorf, make a strong case that this rich, flexible kind of mental time travel, this self-projection into detailed past or future personal episodes, is distinctively human. Other animals show memory. They show some foresight, absolutely. But the complexity, the detail, the way we can flexibly recombine past experiences to imagine novel futures, that seems to be on another level in humans.
Okay, that makes sense. My cat remembers the vet, sure, but I doubt he's vividly simulating the next visit in detail. Now, I saw something interesting, I think it was in Popular Mechanics, about how understanding this can actually help us improve our memory.
Yes, that's a really practical application. The idea is that actively recalling not just the event, but also your thoughts and emotions from the time the memory was originally formed, when it was encoded, they can significantly boost retrieval.
So don't just picture the scene, picture how you felt, what you were thinking during the scene.
Exactly. It seems to engage broader neural networks. You're mentally putting yourself back in that context, which strengthens the memory trace and gives you more cues to pull it up later.
Like if I'm trying to remember a meeting, I should think about how bored I was or how much I needed coffee.
Slight chuck. Potentially, yes.
That contextual richness helps. But there's a flip side. We need to be aware of the limitations. This is a demanding cognitive process. It takes effort.
And it's reconstructive, not like playing a video recording. So memories can get distorted. There's the nostalgic fallacy, for instance, remembering the past is better, or maybe just different than it actually was. Our memories aren't perfect copies.
Ah, the good old days effect. Okay, so besides making us better at reminiscing, or maybe worse, depending on accuracy, what are the bigger implications of understanding mental time travel?
Oh, they're really broad. Think about therapy, especially for trauma. Helping people reprocess past events, maybe recontextualize them by mentally traveling back in a safe way.
Okay, I could see that.
Or education. Instead of just memorizing facts, encourage students to imagine themselves in that historical period or to simulate how they might use a scientific principle in the future. It makes learning stickier.
Makes sense.
And critically, it helps us understand conditions like Alzheimer's disease. A core feature there is the breakdown of episodic memory. the inability to recall the personal past, which also severely impairs the ability to imagine the future. It shows just how vital this mental time travel is for our sense of self, our planning, our daily lives.
Wow, so it's not just a neat trick, it's really fundamental to who we are and how we function.
Absolutely fundamental. We're not just living in the present, we're constantly moving back and forth along our own timeline in our minds.
And speaking of timelines and memory, this next one sounds even more sci-fi, but it takes us way, way back. Scientists looking for humanity's earliest artificial memories. What does that even mean?
Chuckles. Yeah, the term artificial memory sounds futuristic, doesn't it? But here we're talking about the very beginnings of external memory storage. Long before writing, long before computers.
Okay, so not like finding an ancient USB stick then.
Not quite. Researchers are exploring artifacts, some potentially dating back as far as 70,000 years, looking for evidence of our ancestors deliberately encoding information outside their own brains.
70,000 years, that really pushes back the timeline for like complex human thought, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It challenges the idea that sophisticated thinking, abstract representation only emerged much later. These findings suggest our ancestors might have been capable of these complex mental feats much earlier than we often assume.
So what kind of evidence are they looking at? How can you tell if a scratch on an old bone is just a scratch or if it's, an artificial memory?
That's a key question. They're looking for patterns, for purposeful design. Think about tools or symbolic objects like carved ochre or bone fragments found at archaeological sites. Do they show repeating patterns, markings, or images that don't seem purely decorative or functional for the tool itself? The idea is that these markings might represent information, maybe counting something, tracking lunar cycles, mapping territory, telling a story. Information deliberately encoded onto a physical object to be stored, retrieved, or shared.
So like a prehistoric tally stick or maybe even a simple map.
Exactly. Or symbolic representations. Think about early cave paintings. Are they just art? Or could some sequences represent events, perhaps acting as mnemonic devices, memory aids, to help recall complex information, like migration routes or ritual knowledge?
Wow. So these artifacts are like physical extensions of the mind's memory.
That's the concept. They shed light on the evolution of our memory systems, showing very early capabilities for what we now call artificial or externalized memory. It marks the beginning of humans using technology, even very simple technology, like carving tools, to enhance their cognitive abilities.
And this developed over time.
Yes, you see a progression from potentially simple mnemonic devices used by early hunter-gatherers to more complex systems later on, eventually leading to formalized writing systems. These artifacts are like fossilized evidence of evolving cognitive processes and increasing social complexity. We started offloading our memories very early on.
The implications for understanding human history, cognitive science, they seem huge. It changes the story of our mental evolution.
Immense implications. It challenges when complex cognition evolved, deepens our understanding of what makes human minds unique, and suggests that our relationship with technology, with externalizing information, is incredibly ancient. It's fundamental to who we became as a species.
Okay, from the deep past to a very urgent present-day problem, and back to that conservation story that sounds like science fiction. Radioactive rhinos. Seriously, tell me about this. It's happening in South Africa.
It is, yes, and it stems from a truly desperate situation. The intense, relentless poaching of rhinos for their horns, which is pushing some populations towards extinction, particularly in places like South Africa.
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
The radioactive horns, how on earth is that supposed to help? Is it safe for the rhinos?
So the project, sometimes called the Rhino Poaching Project, involves inserting a very small amount of low-level, harmless to the rhino radioactive material into the horn itself.
Okay, harmless to the rhino is good, but why?
The goal is multi-pronged. First, traceability. Many ports and border crossings already have radiation detection equipment to screen for illicit nuclear materials. The idea is that these treated horns would set off those alarms, making them much harder to smuggle undetected.
Ah, like a built-in tracking device, but using radiation?
Sort of.
Yeah.
And second, deterrence. While the level is safe for the rhino wandering around, grinding up the horn or handling it extensively without protection could pose a health risk to poachers or traffickers. It aims to make the horn toxic, undesirable, a liability rather than a valuable commodity.
Laugh slightly. So the horn basically becomes radioactive hot potato. You can't smuggle it easily, and you might not even want to touch it too much. That is audacious.
It's definitely radical, a real intersection of nuclear science, conservation, and law enforcement. It highlights the extreme lengths conservationists are exploring because, frankly, conventional methods haven't been enough to stop the poaching crisis in some areas.
It's a wild idea, born out of desperation, I guess. You have to wonder if we'll see glowing rhinos wandering the savannah. Probably not, but it paints a picture.
Chuckles. Probably not visibly glowing, no. But it's a stark symbol of the fight to save these animals.
Okay, let's lift our eyes from the savannah to the stars, and also back down to Earth. We're looking at NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and two quite different but equally important missions they're involved in.
Right, it's a great example of how space exploration and Earth observation really go hand in hand. First up, we have the upcoming SpaceX Crew 11 launch.
Another crew heading to the International Space Station, the ISS.
Exactly. Scheduled for August 1st, 2025, launching on a Falcon 9 rocket from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This is actually the 11th operational crew rotation mission under NASA's Commercial Crew Program.
11 already. It's becoming almost routine, which is kind of amazing in itself. Who's on this flight? Is it an international crew again?
It is, highlighting that collaborative aspect of the ISS. On board will be NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Finke, Kimya Yui from JXA, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Oleg Platonov, a cosmonaut from Roscosmos, the Russian space agency.
So American, Japanese, Russian,
Yeah.
all working together up there. What's their mission focus for the 6 months they'll be on the station?
A lot of their research is geared towards future, longer duration spaceflight, think moon bases, missions to Mars.
Yeah.
They'll be doing experiments simulating aspects of lunar landings, trying to understand the challenges.
Okay.
They're also investigating ways to protect astronaut vision in space. Long-term microgravity can actually affect eyesight, which is a big concern for deep space missions.
Right, I've heard about that.
And of course, lots of biological experiments studying how plant cells behave in microgravity, looking at bacteria-killing viruses called phages, basically understanding how life works off Earth.
Fascinating stuff, laying the groundwork for humanity's next giant leaps. Now, how does this connect back to helping us here on Earth, like you mentioned?
That brings us to the second mission, the Sentinel-6B satellite. This is another great example of international cooperation.
Who's involved in this one?
It's a joint effort between NASA, ESAT, the European Space Agency, EUMETSAT, which is the European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites, and NOAA, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
A real transatlantic partnership. And what does Sentinel-6B do?
It's set to launch in November 2025, and its main job is to improve hurricane forecasting. It's part of the Sentinel-6 JASON CS mission series.
Hurricane forecasting from space? How does that work?
It works by measuring sea surface height with incredible precision, down to centimeters. Why does that matter? Because the height of the sea surface is a direct indicator of the heat stored in the upper ocean.
Ah, and warmer water fuels hurricanes, right?
Precisely. Warm water is the energy source. And measuring that heat content helps predict not just the path of a hurricane, but also its intensity, particularly the risk of rapid intensification when a storm suddenly gets much stronger, which is really dangerous and hard to forecast. We saw how devastating that can be with storms like Hurricane Milton.
So better data on sea level means better warnings about how strong a hurricane might get.
Exactly. By feeding this super accurate sea level data into weather models, meteorologists can predict intensity changes much more reliably.
Which means people get better warnings, more time to prepare or evacuate. That literally saves lives.
It saves lives and potentially avoids billions in damages. It's a perfect illustration of how investing in space technology in these complex observation satellites provides direct, tangible benefits right here on Earth, helping us deal with the impacts of severe weather and a changing climate.
Okay, let's shift from the cosmos back down to Earth's intricate and sometimes messy economic and political landscape. We're diving into the world of international trade, tariffs, and the significant global ripples caused by recent U.S. policies, particularly those under President Trump.
Yes, President Trump's approach to trade has been, shall we say, very assertive. Using tariffs, essentially taxes on imports, has been a central tool. The stated goal is often to address trade deficits and push for what he calls reciprocal trade deals, meaning trying to get other countries to lower their barriers to U.S. goods.
And we've seen this applied to quite a few countries with pretty varied results and reactions. Let's start with South Africa. What happened there?
South Africa got hit with a 30% tariff on some of its key exports to the U.S., following unsuccessful trade talks. This is particularly significant because South Africa has been a major beneficiary of ANGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
Right. That act gives many African countries preferential duty-free access to the U.S. market. So this tariff undermines that.
Exactly. It's a big deal for their economy. South African officials have been trying to mitigate the damage, even offering concessions like buying American liquefied natural gas or LNG and encouraging investment in the U.S. President Ramaphosa has spoken about supporting affected South African companies.
A serious economic challenge for them. What about closer to home, say, Canada? Usually a very close trading partner.
Canada wasn't spared either. They faced tariffs escalating up to 35% on certain goods. Their response, interestingly, as articulated by people like former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, was a call for Canada to become its own best customer.
Meaning focus more on domestic trade and production.
Essentially, yes. Strengthening their internal economy as a buffer against the uncertainties of U.S. trade policy. A move towards more economic self-reliance, you could say.
Now, these tariffs must hit smaller economies even harder, right? Ones that are heavily dependent on exporting to the U.S.
Absolutely. The impact could be disproportionately severe. Look at Lesotho, a small nation surrounded by South Africa. Reports indicate that even just the threat of Trump imposing his highest tariff rates caused chaos.
Oh, so?
A major clothing factory there, exporting garments to the U.S., a crucial source of jobs, faced disaster due to the uncertainty and potential cost hikes. Even though Lesotho's final tariff rate was set lower at 15%, the damage from the initial fear and disruption was done. One report mentioned that Trump's name still evokes fear and panic there. It really shows the vulnerability of smaller economies.
Wow, that's a stark illustration of the real-world consequences. What about a wealthy, developed nation like Switzerland? Were they impacted?
Yes, even Switzerland felt the pressure. They were hit with a surprisingly high 39% tariff rate on Swiss goods entering the U.S., even higher than the 31% that was initially threatened.
39%. On things like Swiss watches and precision machinery.
Yes, exactly. Key industries. They expressed disappointment and have been trying to negotiate, obviously concerned about the impact on their manufacturing sector. The U.S. justification was similar, citing a perceived lack of reciprocal trade relationships, essentially pushing Switzerland to open its markets more to American products.
It seems like a very broad application of this tariff strategy. How are other major global players reacting, like India or the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa?
There's a view among some analysts that these aggressive trade actions represent a fundamental misreading of the multipolar world, basically, not fully grasping that global economic power is more distributed now. India, for example, is a major U.S. trade partner, but is showing it's not bending under pressure.
How are they pushing back?
They're actively diversifying their global partnerships, trying to hedge against U.S. policies. This could potentially accelerate trends like trading in currencies other than the U.S. dollar, so-called de-dollarization, and foster closer economic ties within the BRICS group. India also notably turned down an offer to buy advanced F-35 fighter jets from the U.S., signaling a preference for different kinds of strategic partnerships. They're asserting their independence.
That's a significant strategic move. And all this tariff talk, this trade tension, how did the financial markets react globally?
Not well. Predictably, there was a lot of nervousness. When these tariff announcements were hitting, combined sometimes with weak economic data, markets tumbled. Europe's STOXX 600 index dropped significantly, like 1.8% in one go. The Dow Jones in the U.S. fell sharply too, sometimes more than 600 points in a day.
Ouch. Big drops.
Yeah, it just underscores how interconnected everything is. Trade disputes in one corner of the world can trigger sell-offs on stock markets thousands of miles away. Lots of volatility.
And what about inside the U.S.? Was there political fallout even within Trump's own Republican Party?
Oh, definitely. These policies were, and remain, quite divisive. There were reports of Republican lawmakers, like Representative Brian Steele in Wisconsin, facing angry constituents, booing and hostility at town hall meetings when trying to defend the tariffs.
So not universal support even on his own side?
No, it highlighted the contentious nature of these policies and the real-world impact they have on businesses and communities, leading to pushback even from within the president's usual base. It shows how complex the domestic politics of trade can be.
Right, and that domestic economic picture leads us straight into the next area. The U.S. economy itself, particularly the job market, and this ongoing, very public tension between President Trump and the Federal Reserve.
Yes, the Fed, America's central bank, responsible for setting interest rates and managing monetary policy. And there's been quite a bit of friction there.
So first, what's the latest on the U.S. jobs situation? Because that often drives these debates.
Well, recent reports suggest things have cooled off. We're seeing a sharp slowdown in growth in job creation, and the unemployment rate has actually ticked up. Some data even indicates the summer labor market is not as strong as previously reported. So there are signs of potential weakness, or at least a loss of momentum in the economy.
And this is happening while President Trump is very publicly criticizing the Fed, right? Pushing them to do something.
Very publicly, yes. He's been calling for the Federal Reserve Board to, quote, wrest full control from the current Fed chair, Jerome Powell, and demanding they lower interest rates significantly.
Rest control. That sounds like a direct challenge to the Fed's independence, which is usually considered pretty important.
It is, traditionally. Central bank independence is seen as crucial for maintaining economic stability, free from short-term political pressures. Trump's rhetoric has been quite aggressive, calling Powell stubborn and demanding more aggressive cuts.
What's Trump's argument for cutting rates so much?
His argument is that inflation is basically under control now, at sustainable levels, so the Fed's reason for keeping rates higher to fight inflation is no longer valid. He believes lower rates are needed to boost economic growth, create more jobs, maybe help the stock market.
Okay, and what's Powell and the Fed's counterargument? Why are they holding rates steady around 4.25 to 4.5%?
Powell's main rationale has been the ongoing risk of inflation linked to Trump's trade policies.
Ah, so the tariffs again.
Exactly. The argument is that the tariffs themselves could push prices up, creating inflationary pressure. So cutting rates too soon or too aggressively could actually reignite inflation. It's a delicate balancing act.
So Powell's essentially saying, your policies are part of the reason we can't cut rates? That's quite a stance.
It is. It highlights the complex interaction between fiscal policy, like tariffs set by the government, and monetary policy, interest rates set by the Fed.
Has there been any pushback against Powell from within the Fed itself?
Yes, and that's quite notable. There's been rare dissent from a couple of Fed board members who happen to be Trump appointees publicly arguing for rate cuts, echoing the president's position. This kind of open disagreement within the Fed's leadership is unusual and highlights the intense political pressure they're under.
This really isn't just about economic theory, is it? The Fed's decisions on interest rates affect everything. Mortgages, car loans, credit card rates. It hits everyone's wallet.
Absolutely. This dispute over the Fed's independence and the right course for monetary policy has direct consequences for ordinary Americans. It influences the cost of borrowing across the entire economy. It's a high-stakes disagreement about who controls the economic levers and what the priorities should be, controlling inflation versus maximizing growth.
Okay, stepping back from the U.S. focus slightly, let's look at the broader global energy picture. It seems like there's some really interesting, maybe unexpected shifts happening in who's trading what with whom and who's making money.
The global energy landscape is definitely in flux, yes. Lots of moving parts. For instance, there's a notable new trade deal between the U.S. and Pakistan focusing on oil.
U.S. oil going to Pakistan, that seems like a shift.
It is. Pakistan is set to receive its first shipment of crude oil from the U.S. This is seen as strategically important, potentially diversifying Pakistan's energy sources and marking a new phase in U.S.-Pakistan economic ties, especially relevant in the context of regional energy politics.
Interesting. But while new deals are forming, others are running into trouble. I heard something about a big Qatar-Germany gas deal being at risk. That seemed crucial for Germany's energy security after cutting back on Russian gas.
Yes, that's a significant potential issue. Qatar had agreed to supply Germany with 2 million tons of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, annually starting next year, a major agreement. But now it's reportedly endangered.
Why? What's the problem?
It seems to be caught up in European Union regulations, specifically an EU directive focused on rights and climate. Basically, rules aimed at ensuring energy deals meet certain human rights and environmental standards.
Okay, laudable goals, but they're causing problems here.
According to critics, the directive is being seen as having high cost and bureaucratic complexity, making the deal difficult to implement smoothly. This uncertainty could disrupt Germany's energy supply plans and raises broader questions about balancing energy security needs with regulatory goals around sustainability and rights.
Wow, a real clash of priorities there. So while Germany's struggling with that deal, where are the energy profits flowing? I saw a headline that seemed almost unbelievable given the geopolitical situation. Russia's wealthiest are getting richer, despite sanctions.
It is quite surprising, and it certainly complicates the narrative around the effectiveness of Western sanctions against Russia. Data from the Bloomberg Billionaires Index indicated that Russia's richest individuals saw their collective net worth jump by about $20.4 billion in the first half of 2025.
$20 billion. How? Where is that coming from?
Primarily from commodities. Many of Russia's super rich made their fortunes in oil, gas, metals, mining things the world still needs. It suggests that these exports are finding buyers, perhaps in Asia or other non-sanctioning regions, and prices have been favorable for producers.
Who are the big winners here?
People like Vladimir Putin, who controls Norilsk Nickel, a huge metals producer. He remains Russia's richest person, worth over $30 billion. Vagit Alekperov from Lukoil, the oil giant, and Alexei Murdashov of Severstal, a steel company, also saw substantial gains.
So mostly the resource tycoons.
Mostly, yes. Though interestingly, Pavel Durov, the founder of the messaging app Telegram, also saw his wealth increase significantly, showing it's not just commodities. But the bulk of the gains seem tied to Russia's natural resource wealth.
What does this tell us then? Are the sanctions just not working? Or is Russia finding ways around them?
It raises complex questions. It could mean several things. Perhaps Russia's economy has adapted better than expected, becoming more self-reliant in some areas. Maybe they've successfully rerouted trade flows away from the West. Or maybe global demand for their key exports remains strong enough to keep generating huge revenues despite sanctions. It highlights the resilience, or perhaps the adaptability, of economies under pressure and forces a rethink about how effective sanctions truly are as a tool to compel political change. Okay, let's shift from economics to the sharp end of geopolitics. Alliances are shifting, tensions are high. Our next deep dive is on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the complex international dynamics surrounding it. It feels like a constant cycle of escalation and blame. It remains a deeply volatile and tragic situation, yes. Recently, Ukrainian President Zelensky called for even tougher sanctions against Russia. This followed devastating Russian airstrikes on Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, which sadly killed 31 people. It was described as one of the deadliest attacks on the city since the full-scale invasion began in 2022.
Just horrific. And amid these calls for tougher sanctions, where does a major player like China stand? They have close ties with Russia, but try to maintain some distance from the conflict itself.
China continues to walk a fine line. They explicitly deny providing military support to Russia and have criticized the U.S. for, in their view, shifting blame onto Beijing. China's envoy at the UN Security Council urged the U.S. to play a constructive role and rejected accusations of being a key military supplier to Moscow.
What's their official line?
They emphasize they haven't provided lethal weapons to either side and that their trade with both Russia and Ukraine is normal and complies with international law. Both Beijing and Moscow often argue that Western arms supplies to Ukraine are just prolonging the conflict.
Meanwhile, what's happening on the military technology front? Is Russia making advances?
President Putin recently made a significant announcement about a new weapon system. He stated that Russia's hypersonic Oreshnik missile, which is an intermediate-range ballistic missile, has entered service.
Hypersonic. That's cutting edge, very hard to defend against.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And crucially, Putin said these missiles will be deployed in Belarus, Russia's close ally bordering NATO countries. He mentioned deployment sites have already been selected. This is a major technological and geopolitical development, putting advanced weaponry right on NATO's doorstep.
Wow. That definitely raises the stakes. And Putin's also been questioning President Zelensky's legitimacy. What's that about?
Yes, Putin has argued that Zelensky lacks a constitutional basis for claiming authority because his presidential term officially expired. But elections couldn't be held due to the war and martial law. Moscow uses this to question the validity of any agreements Zelensky might sign, potentially including a future peace deal.
Undermining him diplomatically.
It complicates the picture, certainly. And there are also some recent polls within Ukraine suggesting Zelensky could face a strong challenge from General Valery Zaluzhny if an election were held, adding another layer of political uncertainty.
Back in the U.S., there's more aid for Ukraine being debated, right?
Yeah.
A new bill.
Yes. U.S. senators have introduced a bill proposing $54.6 billion in aid for Ukraine over the next 2 fiscal years, 2026 and 2027. Mostly direct military assistance.
That's a huge amount. Is there anything particularly controversial about how it's funded?
There is. A key proposal is to use the income generated from frozen Russian assets held in the U.S. to help pay for this aid. Russia considers seizing assets or their income a violation of international law and has threatened retaliation.
Using frozen Russian money to fund Ukraine's defense, that's definitely contentious. Anything else notable in the bill?
It includes increased funding under something called Presidential Drawdown Authority, which lets the president send equipment from U.S. stockpiles quickly. And there's $1 billion earmarked specifically for joint U.S.-Ukraine-Taiwan military drone production.
Drones involving the US, Ukraine, and Taiwan? That sounds quite a strategic message.
It certainly does, emphasizing focus on drone warfare and linking security concerns in Europe and Asia.
But is everyone in the US on board with this level of aid? Are there concerns?
No, there's ongoing debate. Figures like former President Trump have raised concerns about potential misuse of aid by Ukraine and alleged corruption, sometimes calling for leadership changes there. It reflects a divide in the U.S. about the scale and oversight of support for Kiev.
And finally, back to sanctions. We talked about Russia's wealthy getting richer. What's the broader assessment of whether the thousands of sanctions are actually working?
Views differ sharply. Some analysts, like retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, argue that despite over 16,000 sanctions, Russia has remained largely unaffected strategically. His view is that Russia has adapted its economy, found new partners, become more self-sufficient, and just continues to move forward.
So basically, sanctions haven't achieved their main goal of crippling Russia or forcing a policy change?
That's the argument from that perspective. It casts doubt on the effectiveness of sanctions as a primary tool and suggests Moscow is proving quite resilient, defying Western pressure. It's a complex picture with no easy answers about their true impact.
From the conflict in Ukraine, we turn to another deeply troubling humanitarian situation, the crisis in Gaza. The reports coming out are just devastating.
They are truly harrowing.
Yeah.
Aid agencies and observers on the ground describe a worsening hunger crisis. It's reaching a tipping point, with widespread reports of looting, chaos, and Israeli gunfire, making aid delivery incredibly dangerous and difficult.
So even when aid gets to Gaza, distributing it is a massive problem.
A massive problem. There are reports of insufficient food supplies actually reaching the people who need it most. Malnutrition, especially among children, is rising alarmingly. People are resorting to desperate, often risky measures just to feed infants, like using animal feed. It is a catastrophic situation.
It's just awful to even imagine. And this is happening despite Israel supposedly easing its blockade somewhat.
Yes. While more aid entry points might be open compared to earlier phases, the challenges inside Gaza remain immense. Security issues, damaged roads and infrastructure, the breakdown of civil order. It all combines to make getting sufficient aid to the population incredibly difficult. The need vastly outstrips the capacity to deliver safely and effectively.
Amidst all this, some high-profile U.S. officials visited recently. Who went and why?
Yes, top officials linked to the Trump administration, including U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Ambassador Mike Huckabee, visited what was described as a controversial aid distribution site in Gaza.
Why controversial? And was it safe?
The controversy often stems from proximity to Israeli military operations and the dangers involved. The visit itself happened amidst frequent reports of deadly shootings in the area, particularly near sites operated by the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. It underscores the extreme risks involved in any activity there. The stated purpose was to see the conditions and challenges firsthand.
Did they meet with Israeli officials too as part of this?
Yes. Reports indicate Trump's envoy also met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The discussions reportedly covered Gaza aid delivery challenges and also efforts towards achieving a ceasefire. It highlights the intense diplomatic activity happening alongside the humanitarian crisis, trying to navigate the complex interplay of security concerns, aid needs, and political objectives.
Okay, let's shift our focus to Europe now, specifically the European Union. Even within established blocs like the EU, there seem to be plenty of internal disagreements and challenges, right?
Absolutely. The EU is far from monolithic, and internal tensions are a constant feature. One of the most prominent voices often challenging the Brussels consensus is Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Right, he's known for being quite critical of the EU leadership. What's his latest critique?
He recently accused the EU leadership, particularly European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, of having a weak and ineffective foreign policy approach, especially in dealings with the United States.
What specific issues did he raise regarding U.S.-EU relations?
He claimed von der Leyen failed to negotiate a balanced agreement with President Trump on trade matters, alleging she made unauthorized commitments that were detrimental to the EU's interests. He basically argued the EU lost ground in trade disputes and didn't stand up effectively for European businesses.
That's a pretty direct attack on her leadership. Did he offer any colorful descriptions of the EU's diplomatic style? He sometimes uses quite vivid language.
Slight chuckle.
Yeah.
He did indeed. He portrayed the EU's approach as incoherent and lacking in negotiation skills. And then came the metaphor. He likened the EU to a little hamster huddling in the corner. suggesting it's timid and easily intimidated on the world stage.
A little hamster. Wow.
He also accused the EU of engaging in self-humiliation, while simultaneously trying to lecture other countries on human rights and democracy. Strong stuff.
What prompted this particular outburst? Was there a specific incident?
Apparently, it was linked to a recent diplomatic visit by top EU officials to Beijing. Reports suggested the reception they received in China did not align with their status, perceived as a snub, which seemed to fuel Orban's narrative of the EU lacking global clout. And beyond these political critiques, the EU is also constantly wrestling with practical policy challenges, like migration. Italy recently had a major plan involving Albania hit a legal wall, didn't it?
Ah, yes, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's plan. What was the idea there, sending asylum seekers to Albania for processing?
That was the core idea, yes. Italy struck a deal with Albania to set up centers there, process asylum claims for potentially up to 36,000 migrants per year who were intercepted at sea by Italian authorities. The aim was to deter crossings and manage arrivals offshore.
But the EU's top court stepped in and stopped it.
Correct.
Yeah.
The European Court of Justice, the ECJ, delivered a ruling that effectively struck down the scheme. It upheld challenges raised by Italian courts that questioned the legality of Italy designating external countries like Albania as universally safe for this purpose. The plan is now frozen.
What was the specific legal reasoning from the ECJ?
The court ruled that EU law requires strict standards for designating a country, or even parts of a country, as safe. Crucially, they said you cannot classify an entire country as safe when certain regions are not. It demands a more granular, evidence-based assessment. A blanket designation isn't enough if there are unsafe areas within that country.
That seems like an important safeguard. Did the plan face other problems besides the legal ones?
Yes, reports suggested practical hurdles too, even before the ruling. Things like empty detention facilities and high construction costs were mentioned, indicating logistical and financial challenges in actually implementing the scheme. The court case itself involved Bangladeshi asylum seekers whose claims were rejected under this system, showing the real-world impact.
So, a major setback for that specific Italy-Albania plan. But has Italy had any success in reducing irregular migration through other means?
Interestingly, yes. Despite this specific scheme being blocked, Italy has reported some success in reducing undocumented sea arrivals overall, often through controversial agreements with North African countries to intercept boats. The whole situation just highlights the immense difficulty the EU faces in managing migration, balancing humanitarian concerns, legal obligations under EU and international law, national sovereignty, and political pressures. It's a persistent challenge.
Okay, let's swing back to the U.S. for a roundup of some domestic political buzz.
Yeah.
Always something happening there, from high-level concerns about democracy itself to presidential fitness tests.
Never a dull moment indeed. On the serious side, Vice President Kamala Harris made headlines with comments to Stephen Colbert. She stated very directly that she believes U.S. democracy is broken.
Broken. That's a really strong word from a sitting VP.
It is a powerful statement reflecting deep concerns about the political climate, polarization, maybe threats to institutions. The article also noted her decision not to run for California governor, fueling speculation about a potential future presidential run.
Always reading the political tea leaves. And speaking of political battles, President Trump has been targeting former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi again.
Yes, accusing her of insider trading and calling for investigations into her finances. He claims she used non-public information to achieve high returns in the stock market.
This isn't the first time these accusations have surfaced, right? Especially regarding her husband's trades.
No, Pelosi, who has a significant net worth, has faced scrutiny over her family's financial dealings before. She, of course, strongly denies the allegations, calling them ridiculous, and accusing Trump of projecting his own traits. A typical sharp exchange between political rivals.
Right. Now, for something completely different, Trump brought back the presidential fitness test, the one from school. Pull-ups, shuttle run, all that.
Chuckles.
Yeah.
Yes, apparently so. An executive order was signed to revive it. It was described as a childhood rite of passage for decades. The idea is to promote sports, fitness, and nutrition among kids. Again, part of a focus on physical health, a real throwback for many people.
Definitely a blast from the past. And finally, touching back on those tariff debates, things got heated at some Republican town halls.
They did. We mentioned Representative Brian Steele in Wisconsin facing backlash and boos while defending Trump's tariffs. Reports described GOP summer town halls generally featuring heated discussions, reflecting that the policies remain contentious even within the party's base. It shows the local impact and the ongoing internal debates about trade and Trump's economic agenda.
We cover so much serious ground, but sometimes it's the slightly odder, more unusual stories from around the world that stick with you. Let's touch on a few diverse diplomatic notes and administrative shifts.
Absolutely, those often add interesting texture. First, a rather dramatic scene from South Korea involving their jailed former leader, Yoon.
What happened there?
He apparently put up some very unusual resistance during attempts to question him. Reports say he actually took off his prison uniform and lay down on the floor, refusing to cooperate.
Slay on the floor.
Yes. It led to questioning attempts failing and a new arrest warrant being issued. It highlights the unique challenges sometimes faced in legal proceedings with defiant, high-profile figures.
Definitely unconventional resistance.
Exactly.
Okay, and a significant change in the UK's Ministry of Defence.
Yes, the permanent secretary, David Williams, who is the top civil servant in the department, is set to leave his post this autumn. His departure follows a significant data breach related to Afghan nationals who worked with UK forces. It signals accountability at a high level for that security lapse.
Right, accountability is key. Now, for something much later, elephants. For President Putin.
Chuckles. Yes, rather charming diplomatic gesture. The government of Laos is planning to gift a pair of elephants to Russia.
Elephant.
It's to mark the 65th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Laos and Russia. Elephants are symbols of peace, friendship, and well-being in Lao culture. Apparently, President Putin acknowledged the gift. And there's even a historical connection. Elephants were sometimes gifted to Russian czars back in the 18th century, so they have a history in places like St. Petersburg.
A bit of historical resonance there.
Right. And beyond the symbolism, it also subtly underscores the growing trade ties between Laos and Russia. Sometimes diplomacy comes in very large gray packages.
Laughs. It certainly adds a memorable touch to international relations. Okay, for our final section, we're focusing on critical public health issues and some very immediate environmental concerns and weather impacts. These are things affecting people's health and daily lives right now.
Crucial areas, definitely. First, a worrying situation involving the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. An advisory panel to the FDA apparently disseminated some misinformation about using SSRIs during pregnancy.
SSRIs, those are common antidepressants, right? What kind of misinformation?
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, yes, very common. The specifics of the misinformation weren't fully detailed in the source, but the concern is that this FDA panel cast doubt on the safety or appropriateness of using these medications during pregnancy.
And that's dangerous.
Extremely concerning for doctors and maternal health experts. Why? Because untreated depression or anxiety during pregnancy can have severe consequences for both the mother and the baby. If misinformation leads pregnant individuals to stop taking necessary medication abruptly, the outcomes could be devastating.
So the fear is that bad information from an official source could lead people to make harmful health decisions.
Exactly. The FDA is reportedly considering issuing new warnings about antidepressant use in pregnancy. But this whole situation has sparked concern about potential bias on the advisory panel and the critical need for accurate, evidence-based information, especially around such sensitive health issues.
A real reminder of how important clear, reliable health communication is. Now, shifting to an immediate health threat, there's been an outbreak of Legionnaires' disease. Where was this?
In central Harlem, in New York City. Sadly, the outbreak has led to one death, and more than 20 people have become ill.
Legionnaires' disease. What exactly is that? How do people get it?
It's a severe type of pneumonia, basically a lung infection. It's caused by inhaling mist or water droplets contaminated with Legionella bacteria. This bacteria likes to grow in warm water systems, things like cooling towers for large buildings, hot tubs, complex plumbing systems.
So it's not spread person to person?
Generally, no, it's from environmental sources. Health authorities in New York are investigating this cluster of cases to pinpoint the source and prevent further spread. There are concerns more cases might emerge, so they're monitoring closely. It's a serious public health issue, especially in dense urban areas with complex building infrastructure.
Okay, from public health threats to the health of our planet and its immediate impacts. Climate change isn't just abstract numbers. It's affecting specific places and ways of life right now.
A really poignant example of this comes from the Ladakh region in India, high up in the Himalayas. Climate change there is threatening the traditional nomadic culture centered around yaks.
Yaks. How are they being affected?
Yaks are crucial to the traditional way of life for communities like the Champa nomads. But climate change is leading to less snowfall and receding glaciers, which means less water and changing vegetation patterns in the high-altitude pastures where the yaks graze.
So the yaks don't have enough to eat.
It's becoming harder to sustain the herds. And this has knock-on effects not just for the people, but for the whole fragile Himalayan ecosystem. These pastoralists, through their traditional grazing practices, actually help manage the landscape, control invasive plants, and maintain biodiversity.
So losing the herding culture damages the environment too.
Yes, it's all interconnected. Their traditional way of life, using yak wool for tents and clothing, making butter from yak milk, is directly at risk due to these environmental changes. Plus, there are other pressures, like younger generations seeking different kinds of work and the impact of increased tourism on resources. It's a complex threat to a unique culture deeply tied to its environment.
A really stark example of climate change impacting culture and ecology directly. And we're also seeing immediate weather events linked to broader climate patterns elsewhere, right?
We are. These serve as constant reminders. For instance, the UK Met Office recently named Storm Florus. It's expected to bring unseasonably disruptive, strong winds and heavy rain to the UK, highlighting how weather patterns are becoming less predictable.
Unseasonal storms. Yeah, that seems to be happening more often.
And on the other side of the Atlantic, in Florida, much of Brevard County is under a major heat risk warning. The heat index, which factors in humidity, is climbing into the triple digits, extremely dangerous conditions.
So extreme heat in one place, unseasonal storms in another.
Exactly. These localized events, while varied, are consistent with the broader trends predicted by climate science, more frequent and intense extreme weather. It underlines the urgent reality of climate change impacts, affecting communities from the Himalayas to Florida, and the ongoing challenge of adaptation.
So after diving deep into all of that, what's the big picture? Today we've journeyed from the incredible inner space of the human mind, our ability to travel time mentally, and the ancient origins of storing memories outside ourselves.
All the way to using radioactivity to save rhinos. And then plunged into the turbulent waters of global trade wars, seeing how tariffs impact economies big and small, from South Africa to Switzerland, and the tense relationship between the U.S. president and the Federal Reserve.
Right. We navigated the complexities of the Ukraine conflict, the blame games, the new weapons, the questions around sanctions. We looked at the heartbreaking humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the difficult diplomatic efforts surrounding it.
We also saw the internal fractures within the EU, with figures like Orban challenging the leadership and the legal tangles over migration policy. And we covered the constant buzz of U.S. politics, from concerns about democracy to accusations of insider trading, and even bringing back school fitness tests.
And we didn't forget the critical updates on public health information, disease outbreaks, and the undeniable immediate impacts of climate change hitting communities around the globe.
It's an incredibly diverse picture, isn't it? Human ingenuity, conflict, cooperation, crisis,
Yeah,
all happening simultaneously.
it really is. So as we wrap up, here's something to think about. We've seen this incredible human capacity to develop complex thought over millennia, to recall the past and imagine the future, to build tools from carved bone to spaceships. And yet we're also grappling with these immense global challenges, trade disputes escalating, conflicts causing immense suffering, a climate crisis demanding urgent action.
So the provocative thought might be, how effectively are we using that incredible cognitive ability, that capacity for mental time travel, not just individually, but collectively? Are we truly learning the lessons from our past, our shared history of successes and failures to better anticipate and navigate the future?
Yeah. Amidst all these swirling global events, how much is our collective future shaped by our ability to genuinely learn, adapt, and work together towards something more equitable and sustainable? Something to ponder.
Definitely something to ponder.
Yeah.
Keep thinking about how these stories connect, perhaps even to your own community, and keep that curiosity alive.